You're good to start, Mr. Mayor?
Okay, perfect. I'd just like to welcome everyone to our meeting tonight, Tuesday, June 7th, 6:30 p.m. I'll ask if there is any disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we'll go on to staff reports. And Chris's staff report, she's pointed out, is in this, but we have one from Dan Ennis. Got it. Does anyone have any questions for Dan? If he's here, he loves answering.
Just wondering why they didn't warranty the chain,
Because it's, they say it's 30 days after invoice, then the warranty's up.
just in 30
30
days.
days.
Wow,
So that's a few grand.
It's not much better than a tail light warranty.
Pretty much, that's what it is.
Yeah.
I mean,
a little pricier though than a tail light.
yes,
What was the end result cost of that? Or did the new chain come in yet?
I didn't order a new chain, I just used the old ones we had, and I have another spare, so if anything was wrong with that one. We're gonna just ride it out, and it's a greater slate to be dealt with a couple more years,
Wow, okay.
so I think it'll last till then.
Okay, John Paul's ill today, so we have nothing from him. Chris is on.
I do have something I'd like to say, if I have a moment, please.
Sure.
We received an appeal to the zoning bylaw amendment for the trailers. So we will be proceeding to the Ontario Land Tribunal for that. So the whole thing is on pause until we get through that appeal process. Okay,
Good.
that's all I have.
Chris, do we need to post that for those that might be going ahead and planning septic systems or anything like that?
We haven't had anyone come in for an application for a trailer yet, and we haven't posted it. I've notified the North Bay Manawa Conservation Authority that we are at an appeal process. So the way that it's worded in our zoning bylaw right now on the rural with all of that space, those people can still have their trailer.
Yes.
It was just for the 1 acre.
Yeah, okay.
Good to know. Any other questions? Okay, let's go on then to committee reports, and we'll start with Councillor Moore.
Okay, we had a museum board meeting on June the 1st. We went over all of our special events that we will have this summer. I won't go into them because Kristen has done a wonderful job in putting them all in the newsletter. So you can read about everything in there. And then we had, unless you have something to add to it, Steve.
No, no, everything that I have is probably, I was just jotting some notes down.
Okay, and we did have a recreation committee meeting last night, June the 6th, and I will let Jason talk about that.
Okay, good, thank you. Any questions for Councillor Moore? So Councillor March?
No committee meetings, but I did attend the seminar on land use planning advancement. It was good, but it's more for bigger urban areas. Like they was zoning for a factory, a plastics factory, and a 6-story apartment building. And then one severing lots that had an old dump on it, which was quite interesting. So they broke us up into groups. It was 30 some people on it, I guess, and broke up to the 6 groups in each part. And then we present it and we discuss. So, but you would definitely have to have the fundamentals of the land use planning course first.
Right.
But it went from 9:30 till after 1. So doesn't matter, got our money's worth.
Good.
Great.
But it was when I I just got the request for the survey, I would be putting in that maybe Amo should be looking at sessions for rural municipalities and sessions for moderate size and sessions for large
Right.
areas to make it more applicable. But it was worthwhile.
Good, good. And I got your note about the new head of North Bay Mattawa, and then they sent it all out as well, so,
Yeah, June 16th, I believe, is reception
okay.
for Ryan.
And yes, that's in the correspondence. Yes, Councillor Kurt.
Oh, you want the library?
Anything that you'd like to
Okay.
share with us?
All right, well, we weren't supposed to have a library board meeting this month. Forego that until September, but unfortunately, we lost a longtime volunteer, Billy Brown. So we had a thing for her last night. Their workplace were there, so we had something at the library for her last night. And this year's story walk will be in her name to honor her 32 years of volunteering for WASI. That's about all.
Okay. And just so hard when you lose these longtime volunteers because there's so few of them. Now that we have any,
Too.
pardon?
It was sudden too.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay. Counselor Scott.
We had our recreation committee meeting last night. Discussion was soccer, and I can't thank enough the ladies that are running it and running it so efficiently, so well. Feedback from the parents. It's been beyond, and I just give them kudos for all their work. I actually really think that the rec committee this year is doing way more than it's ever done since I've been in the township. And I have to give the whole committee as a whole kudos, because they're coming up with ideas, but they're also stepping up, participating, following this stuff through. And it makes it easy to run when everybody's pitching in. The new stuff is in the newsletter, it's coming out. Have more questions, and there's some other stuff we're looking into for later on, some for the older kids, maybe some for the adults. So
Looking at maybe line dancing here, a teen dance for teens in the area, and maybe a community center. And James is right. With the new committee, lots of ideas. I think traditionally we've done 3 children's parties. That's what the rec did, so we're adding more to that.
It's good. And I think, after COVID, everybody just is so tired of doing nothing that they're ready and willing to, get out there.
Exactly.
And the soccer numbers are incredible. And I hope to be there next Tuesday night, canceled tonight. And last Tuesday, something special happened. But anyway, see just how good it is. And that's incredible number of kids to deal with. So
181, and they had a game the first night. It wasn't just,
registration and
it
go.
was go, the girls were set up, they had everything in boxes, they had the names on the shirts. Those that pre-registered, like they had, it's beyond my capabilities how well they organize this.
Great.
well, I'm getting stuff outside the township and inside the township. People are raving about it, so.
There are kids from all over.
Yeah, that was the one point when we were at 179, someone said, I can't believe there's 179 kids in Nipissing. And I went, there aren't, And
Oh,
I've shared,
12.
Yeah.
I've shared that with some of our neighboring counselors as well. That maybe, because they always ask, you know, when we participate in calendar or, you know, maybe you should be helping out. So now I said, we are helping out, doing our part. So it's good. And I look forward to, I hope it's a good night next Tuesday so I could get off the rock and come and see. So, and all I have, we had a building committee at East Home, and good news, carpenter strike ended. That would be a week ago Friday. So Vanos Construction has the contract for the East Home renovation, and they are starting on June 8th, right? On June 8th, and they start with the administration and everything like that. So that right inside the front door is the first wing that they're going to start. They're trying to avoid patient rooms as long as they can, and they have grandiose plans, how many they're going to do a day. But we're going to start with do 3, you move them out in the morning, they come back at night, and you're all done, you know, where they thought they'd do a whole wing and just board up the windows, and it might be a few weeks. Well, where do you go for a few weeks? You know? But again, that's what you do in big centers, but can't do it there because there are no extra rooms. So it's going to be difficult. And it's interesting, I found out, didn't realize that they have to have a heat warning in effect if the temperature goes above 22 degrees.
Wow.
And I've, you know, so what happens is if they're in there working and those people are displaced and there's someplace that isn't central air, then we have to bring in air conditioning and set up cooling centers. So, but they're ready. The air conditioners that are coming out of the windows, they're going in one spot. So we'll chill them down. And
22 sounds cool for Wolf.
that's what I was thinking.
Usually they would find that.
You know, I find it cool. Of course, I'm an old folk, but anyway. And so on June 16th, we have to have our hard hats, and we come for the first inspection after the install, and then they'll be going at it pretty hard after that. So that was promising that they're getting started anyway, even if it is 6 weeks behind schedule, we're on our way. And then the next East Home meeting itself is 22nd, I think. So nothing till then. So any questions for anybody on committee reports? If not, is Oscar there yet? Yes, he is. I see you, Oscar. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. My apologies, Council. I was actually in another council meeting. So a little delayed, unfortunately, but I'm here now. So apologize for being tardy.
You're ready, willing, and ready to go.
I will say congratulations on being excited over accounting, for what it's worth. So, Your Worship, members of council, wanted to make a presentation. This is a follow-up to the initial presentation of the financial statements to talk about financial indicators for the township, but we also wanted to provide a little bit of insight in terms of calculating your municipal surplus. And I can appreciate that that seems relatively self-evident, but the truth of the matter is it's not necessarily as easy as some people may think it is. So I'm hoping, council, you can actually see my screen. So from a financial reporting perspective, and in terms of how the township arranges there's financing, there's really 3 funds that are built into your financial statements. There's the operating fund, which generally deals with the day-to-day operations of the municipality. There's reserve funds, which is where you retain surplus funds for specific purposes, and in some cases unrestricted. And then there's the capital fund, where you deal with your capital expenditures. So generally speaking, operations has operating fund, capital fund, and so on and so forth. What you'll find, council, is all 3 of those funds are rolled up into your financial statements, but there are some significant differences in terms of how you budget for things versus how your financial statements report them. And so because of that, there's actually a reconciliation that needs to happen to adjust for these things, because council, and I think I've mentioned this, you can't look at your statement of operations and say our annual financial statements say we have a surplus of X or a deficit of X, because that's what's reflected for accounting purposes, not what's reflected for your budget. So on this slide, what we tried to do is provide council with a summary of the things that you need to consider when you try to reconcile from your financial statements to your budget. So generally speaking, your budget is more reflected on a cash flow basis, where money coming in, regardless of the nature of it, is treated as a revenue source. Money going out, regardless of the nature of it, is treated as an expense. So for example, transfers from reserves, revenue in your budget, not revenue in your financial statements. Proceeds on the issuance of debt, revenue in your budget, not treated as revenue in your financial statements. Similarly, when you make payments on long-term debt, the principal component, treated as an expense in your budget, it's not reflected as such in your financial statement. So these are the adjustments and the normalizations that you have to make. So on an annual basis, council, what we do is we provide your staff with a summary and a reconciliation between what's on the statements versus what you use for budget purposes. Because under the provisions of the Municipal Act, you're not technically allowed to have a surplus. So you can either transfer it to reserves or you can roll it into the prior year's financial statements. And on this slide, council, is the summary of the surplus for 2021, which reflects your most recent fiscal year, and 2020, which is the last year. When we do this analysis for your staff, we typically don't include the numbers in yellow because they're not considered to be significant. So we leave out inventory and prepaids because they're minor accounting adjustments. And as you can see, generally consistent on a year-over-year basis, up and down a bit. So we leave that out. What you'll find, council, is we do start with your financial statements. We add back depreciation. We add back the accounting adjustment we make for the landfill. We deduct your capital. If you take in debt, show it as revenue. If you sell assets, show it as revenue. If you take it in as a principal repayment on long-term debt, show as an expense. So this is the calculation that we use. Admittedly, in years past, we used a bit more simple because we took out the prepaids once again, but this is generally how your staff do it. And on an annual basis, Chris will send us an email. She'll ask about the numbers. We'll have the conversations. And council, I want to make it very clear, this is why it's important to look at it this way, because if you look at your financial statements for 2021, it actually shows a deficit for accounting purposes of $485,000. The municipality did not incur a loss. So I want to make it clear, and that's an important factor because if somebody picks up your statements, they may question your financial decision-making. You need to recognize your financial statements. There's a number of adjustments that you have to make to get to the bottom line. So we wanted to show this because we know there has been some discussion about how municipalities determine surpluses and are they, what's the basis for it? So we just wanted to share with council. The second part of our analysis, your worship and council, is what we've done in the past in terms of the financial benchmarking, if you will. And what we've done is we've selected 10 municipalities to act as comparators. Now, because you're a single-tier municipality located in Northern Ontario, we used single-tier municipalities located in Northern Ontario. So we couldn't go south of the Parry Sound District because what that would mean is you would get into a county system where there's 2 tiers of government. And so because of that, they're not apples to apples comparators. What we've generally tried to do, council, and you notice we put households first, is we're using households as the basis for determinants. So what we've tried to do is we've tried to find municipalities that are close to you in terms of having about 1,000 households. And so these are the comparators that we've used. I can appreciate, council, that there is no perfect comparator for the township of Nipissing. I can also appreciate that there's issues with some of these municipalities. At the end of the day, we wanted to come up with the comparators based on number of households. What I will say, council, is this is the original list. We did not take out or add once we saw what the numbers look like. We basically picked the list and we proceeded forward. And so in terms of your report card, for lack of a better term, there's 4 categories of indicators that we looked at. We looked at indicators that talk about the municipality's sustainability and flexibility. And what this is, council, is basically a measure of the ability of the municipality to continue operations without having to run out of money, or to be able to accommodate short-term disruptions to your system, like a pandemic. And so from an indicator perspective, what we've looked at is we've looked at reserves and reserve funds per household, because what it talks about is how much do you have in contingency funds? How much do you have built up for a war chest in the event that you have a large expenditure or a loss of revenue that you can draw down? We've also looked at long-term debt, and long-term debt factors into this for 2 reasons. One is if you have too much debt, it's going to compromise your ability to deliver municipal services because you're paying more in interest and principal costs. If you don't have enough debt, or if you have lower amounts of debt, what that allows you to do is you can always borrow if you have to. So it gives you borrowing capacity. Vulnerability is a measure of your potential exposure to revenue losses. And really what this is it's a measure of how much you rely on grants. So grants for operating purposes, grants for capital purposes. I will say, council, you can never have enough in grants. So don't get me wrong when we look at this. It's just in some municipalities, the only time they buy capital is when they have a grant. And what that means is if you don't have a grant, you don't have capital, which may not necessarily be the most advantageous approach to managing a municipality. The third measure we look at is affordability. And this is always something that municipal councils are challenged with, balancing the needs of the municipality with the affordability and the ability of residents to pay. So we look at residential taxes per household. We look at the residential tax rate as well to give us some indications as to how you would look at this. Council, we typically try to look at residential taxes as a percentage of household income. The problem that we have is the most recent income data that we have is from 2015. And as council can appreciate, a lot has changed in 7 years. Once Statistics Canada updates the census data for this, we'll start to reintroduce that measure. It's just right now, the data, for lack of a better term, is unreliable because it's so old. So we didn't want to put it in. The last point that we look to is capital adequacy. And this is a measure of how good of a job the municipality does in reinvesting in your infrastructure and keeping it current. So there's 2 indicators that we use. There's capital additions as a percentage of your amortization, and net book value as a percentage of your historical costs. So these are the indicators that we would have used. There's 8 indicators that are provided. So what you can see, council, is we've provided some of the detailed analysis in the subsequent slides. This information is based on the 2020 financial information return. So admittedly, it is a year old. And the reason why is because the 2021 financial information returns haven't been submitted by all municipalities. And so because of that, we use the most recent information that we have. What you can see, council, is your reserves and your reserve funds are the 3rd highest of the comparator group, which I would suggest to you is a positive thing, because what that means is you do have those resources, you do have those reserves in place to be able to fund capital, to be able to use a managed approach to investing in your infrastructure, and also to avoid the need to have to run to the bank or run to the taxpayers if you have unexpected expenses or unexpected revenue losses. From a debt perspective, you can see that your debt is relatively low. You have the 4th lowest level of debt. So you've managed to build up your reserves, you haven't borrowed heavily. There are different approaches, council, and different philosophies with respect to the use of debt. Some people prefer a pay-as-you-go. So no debt, everything gets prepaid out of local sources because they view debt as a potential risk. Other places will look at debt and say, we think debt could be manageable. We think there's an appropriate time and place for debt. And then other places may have a tendency to use debt heavier than others. Council, I always used to say that if I had to pay cash for my house, I'd still be living with my mom. So there is the use of debt. That line was really funny until I got separated and had to move in with my mom, by the way. But that was a while ago. In terms of the vulnerability measures, when you look at the operating grants, your operating grants are a bit towards the lower end of the range, where 1 out of every $5 of revenue come from operating grants. Part of this is your OMPF funding for operating purposes. Part of this, council, also reflects the nature of your services. So if you have water and wastewater services, for example, you can expect to get higher levels of grants than municipalities that don't. From a capital perspective, you've actually done quite well. You have the 4th highest percentage of capital funding through grants of the comparator municipalities. And in some cases, you get capital grants on a recurring basis. So federal gas tax, for example, the per capita basis for the OCIF. Other capital grants are more project specific. So chances are if you're building something big and you've attracted grants, you may fare better on this. In terms of residential taxes per household, council, what you can see is that your residential taxes are the 3rd highest of the comparator group, slightly higher than the 4th highest of the group. What's interesting though, council, is while you have a higher level of taxes per household, your tax rate is actually the lowest of the comparator group. And so if I had to give my druthers, I would suggest to you a couple of things. Your residential taxes very much reflect the fact that 99.02% of your taxable assessment is residential. And so to the extent that you actually are a community with more commercial assessment, you have the ability to spread the tax burden onto non-residential taxpayers. You have a very low rate of non-residential taxation, council. And the reason why I know it's 99.02% is because I calculated it. So 99 out of every $100 you raise come from residential. So part of this number, admittedly, is because you just don't have the assessment base to spread it around. But when you look at the tax rate and what you charge as a percentage of assessment, you'll find the number is low. And there's a couple of ways that you could look at this. Part of it, I think, reflects the overall efficiency of the municipality, where because of your operations and your service levels, despite the per household numbers, your levy is actually low because you're not spending as much as your comparators. Part of this may reflect the fact that you actually have higher assessed values in your community. So council, if you think about your budgeting and you think about your tax bill, it's an A times B calculation. A is the assessment rate, B is the tax rate. If I have very high assessment, I need a relatively low tax rate. If I have low assessment, I need a very high tax rate. There's a municipality in northwestern Ontario by the name of Manitouwadge that was a former mining town until the mines closed. Their municipal tax rate residential was 8%. And the reason why their residential tax rate was 8% was because the average assessment of a home was $1,200 or $12,000. So it's an A times B calculation. When you look at assessed values and you look at higher assessed values, oftentimes, council, what that's an indicator of is higher income levels in the community. So from an affordability perspective, it may actually take the pressure off. More house, more income, more ability to pay. And the comment that I will make, council, and I don't want to be flippant when I say this, but the taxation per household in your municipality is less than what I pay for internet and cable service at my home. So if I lived in Nipissing you would not be the highest expense from a home ownership perspective that I have. When I think about my hydro bills, when I think about my gas bills, when I think about my telecommunication bills, they're actually all higher than this number. So I think it's important to put it in a bit of perspective as well. I'm not saying go out and spend the farm, but at the end of the day, I also think it's important to recognize what people get for what they pay. In terms of your capital additions, so council, as you'll recall from your financial statements, when you spend money on capital, you put it on the books at its historical cost and you amortize it over time. So if you built a building in the 1970s, it's on your financial statements in 1970s dollars, not 2022 dollars. So you have to look at inflation, but what you can see, council, is in 2020, you actually invested more in your capital than the amortization expense was. And so what that means is if all you were doing was investing equal to amortization, if this number was 100% or lower, you're actually losing ground because assets are coming off of your books at historical cost and they're not being replaced at current value. So this is a positive indicator. It means there's more healthy reinvestment in capital that doesn't just try to replace based on replacement cost. But the true measure of this, council, is what is the net book value of your assets as a percentage of historical cost. And what this is, council, is it's a proxy for how much useful life do you have on your assets. And if you think about your assets as a pool, some assets are brand new, so they have 100% of their useful life left. Some assets are past their useful life, so their useful life is 0. On average, you should be at 50%. What you'll find, council, is you're actually at 59%, which means you've done a relatively good job reinvesting in your capital, reinvesting in your infrastructure. And as you can see, you actually have the second highest ratio on this graph, which means in terms of reinvestment, there aren't a lot of municipalities in the comparators that have done as good a job as you. So if we flip back sort of to the report card, we've provided a bit of a summary which encapsulates some of the discussions here. Council, it's not our place to dictate policy and strategy for our clients, and that's not our intention here. I would suggest to you, though, council, the results of the benchmarking would indicate you're actually in pretty good shape. You've got good reserves. You're not overly burdened from a debt perspective. You've managed to reinvest in your infrastructure at a rate that keeps it operating at a certain standard. When you look at your taxes, the taxes per household is a little higher. Your taxation rate is actually the lowest. And so what would be really interesting, council, is to do this again once the income number comes out and run taxes as a percentage of household income, because that really gives you a measure as to whether you have an affordability concern. But from an overall perspective, council, I think this reflects well on the decisions you've made in the past. From a budgeting perspective, you've set up good reserves, good investment, a good financial position. So there isn't an impending challenge that you're having here. And so really, when you look at some of the concepts for council's consideration going forward, it's really talking about how do you continue to manage what you're doing? How do you continue to balance between affordability, capital needs, and operating pressures? I will say, council, with inflation going off at 6.9%, with gas costing $2.23 a liter, it is going to be a challenge. We are in an environment from a cost escalation perspective where we haven't been for 20 to 30 years. And I'm old enough to remember the stories about 1981, when inflation was running at 10 to 12% and interest rates were running at 19 to 21%. Hopefully we don't get there, but this is going to become a time where your financial position is actually going to allow you to absorb some of these pressures. The other comment that I'd make, council, and once again, it's not our place to dictate policy. I'm always interested in municipalities that try to find 0% tax increases in environments where inflation's running 6-7%. Because what that naturally infers is that you're cutting services in order to balance to zero. You can do what you want. It's not my budget and it's not my place to say thou shalt do this. It's just important to recognize that these are unusual times. There are cost pressures that are here today that you did not have last year. And so your budget for 2023 may actually feel a little bit different. So, Your Worship, members of council, bit of a discussion about your surpluses, bit of a discussion about your financial position and your performance. I hope this has provided some insight and given you some things to think about. If there are any questions, more than happy to answer them at this time.
I'm going to open the floor, Oscar, if anybody has a question right now. I always appreciate all the work that you put into this, and it's just great to have the comparators to see, so we can look at what's going on around us. But again, if anybody has a question, feel free, because it looks like Oscar's still at work.
Yeah.
I'm actually at home. So.
Nice spot.
No, good report. I don't have any questions. Well done, Oscar.
Thank you.
One I have it just to get clear in my mind is the additions as a percentage of amortization. What would cause, I'm not gonna name municipalities, but what would cost someone to be a little higher because they had some additions that they had to borrow, or?
I think, Your Worship, through you, Your Worship, what you'll find, Councillor, is the problem with this analysis is it's 1 year and it's point in time. So if you buy a fire truck, for example, that's $375,000 of capital addition that you won't have next year. So where you see the percentages to be significantly higher, my suspicion is it's a major capital project that drives the numbers unusual. What would be helpful, council, and what I'm happy to do the next go around is actually make this a 5-year average. So that what you have is you have a bit more track record to take those things out. I'll give you an example. If you go and you build an arena for $20 million or whatever the number is, your percentage is going to be north of 1,000%. It's not really a long-term capital reinvestment. It's more point in time. But I would suggest, Councillor, to your point, where the numbers are significantly higher, it's probably because there's been a major one-time addition that skews the numbers in the year of analysis.
That's what I figured, but I just wanted to make.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, well, in that case, Oscar, I'll thank you for your time, and we appreciate you being with us and sharing that tonight. And I always feel comforted knowing that we're still in good shape and in good hands. So thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, Oscar.
Okay. You'll all be able to sleep an extra hour tonight. I won't have to worry about that. As he said, the price for a fire truck, they got a really good deal on that one, right?
Yeah, I take that.
Yeah. And
There was a point in time, maybe 10 years ago. About that, yeah.
DM is going, okay. Thank you all. And we'll move on to number 5 on your agenda. And you. So that would be the minutes of the last meeting. I need to move her into secretary, Councillor Moore. And Councillor Scott. Thank you. So it's number R 2022-128, moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Scott, that the minutes of the council meeting held May 24th, 2022 be adopted as published. All in favor? Carried. And next, number 6, now the newsletter, we were going to do, we talked about deferring it. But talking to Kristen, we could pass it tonight if, like she's made the adjustments for the trunk sale. And she's made the adjustments for the Heritage Park for drive-in movie at dusk. Is there anything else that you want changed? Because if there are no other changes, we can accept it and then put it out after this. And if there are other changes that are bigger, we'll have to defer it till the next meeting. So, Will, did you have anything?
Yeah, so I'd like to add that we're gonna close the beaches the week of September the 6th. So we'll winterize the change room out, washrooms, remove picnic tables and stuff. That gives us enough time to put everything away properly. And so right at the bottom of the beaches on the center page,
Yep.
we'll just add that little.
Okay.
And then if we could, Heritage Park Grand opening, if we could add July 2nd to that.
That's sorry.
Yeah, we missed that one.
Yeah.
And then we got a couple wordings, like we talked earlier about the trunk sale, we can add in the windshield.
Yeah.
And then we'll address the whole thing in the flyer. That was it, sorry.
I did notice that from the candidate, are we starting at 4 p.m.?
That's what we had last night discussed.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's supper time, so I don't know. In the past, we've always started at 6, am I not correct? No? Maybe I'm
We
mistaken.
had kids' activities earlier,
Yeah, okay.
and then the
all
other
right.
thing was it's till 6.
Okay, all right, that's fine then. Do we want to put where it's taking place up in there?
Just Heritage Park
Yeah, we
somewhere.
don't have Heritage Park in there.
And then the playground opening was at 4:30.
Maybe we could move the 14 Blake Street from the bottom, Kristen, up into the center, kind of in between them or something.
Yeah, because it's all going on there. That's a good idea. Right
If we
in the
could do
middle.
something.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Yes, that's,
I can put it both spots too. I mean,
Did you want to also add entertainment in there? On Canada Day? We don't have entertainment.
Right.
Music, whatever you want to
sorry,
call
Kristen,
it.
that was my fault.
I'm sorry, we're adding.
Entertainment, yeah,
Yes.
to be determined.
Real, just the
How's your
entertainment.
voice, Steve? Are you good for you?
Is that the day you're having the dunk tank?
According to Will, yes, so.
Okay.
Not according to me, it was just something that
From the rec committee.
somebody brought up and we brought forward to the committee. Because they thought that, well, another counselor thought the mayor would. And somebody said
Another
maybe the deputy
counselor.
mayor.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah,
Another
I'm not
council.
going into.
And
it.
the CAO was put in there too.
Okay, Chris, you go
So-
for it.
Fire chief.
The fire chief wasn't mentioned by chance, like, he doesn't swim. The road super,
I'm mentioning the fire chief right now.
road super would get a lot of tickets.
Yep.
Yeah, and we could use the price that they're paying for the tickets to be donated somewhere, whether it be food bank or whatever. The more you bring in, the more dunks you get.
Sure.
I'm not sure if the dunk tank will be in this year, but I know it was on the radar, something that the committee wanted to talk about later.
Well, I know everybody here is a good sport and they sure want to volunteer. But
Chris is shaking her head, so we're good.
Yeah, okay,
Any-
you're gonna
she's
go
in,
to- yeah,
she's in.
That's great.
anything else that you want on this? Because if not, we'll pass it tonight and then we'll be able to just make those small changes and get it out there. So if not, it looks good. So do you want to number that and we'll fire it up? Thank you very much. So we're going to approve the summer newsletter for circulation as amended. Okay, so a mover, Councillor Kirky, Councillor March, thank you. So it's number R 2022-129, moved by Councillor Kirky, seconded by Councillor Marchant, that we approve the summer newsletter for circulation as presented. All in favor? Thank you. Number 7. And we didn't circulate this only because it's just along Birch Grove Road. And this is a.
Part of a,
Pardon? Go ahead.
it's part of a severance application. So whenever there's a severance or there's any manipulation of land, any part of the traveled road, we ask that it be transferred to the township. So I think there's 7 pieces along this one property, and that's all this is.
And our lawyers looked over it and their lawyers looked over it and they both said, yes, there are no issues. Please go forward with it. So if I have a mover and a seconder, then I will read it because it's long. So Councillor Kirky, Councillor Scott. So it's number R 2022-130, moved by Councillor Kirky, seconded by Councillor Scott. Whereas the owner of Part Lot 7, Concession 19, Part Lot 8, Concession 19, Part Lot 9, Concession 19, and Part Lot 10, Concession 19, has offered to convey part of Birch Grove Road, which crosses the property to the Township of Nipissing for road purposes. And whereas the Township of Nipissing official plan policy is to acquire title to roads that have historically been used and maintained as public roads in the township, but have not been dedicated as public highways. Now therefore, the township is willing to accept the portion of Birch Grove Road to the municipality for road purposes as shown as part 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8 on plan 42R21-816. Now, are there any questions about this? So again, all part of the official plan and just acquiring the title to these roads that we're already using, of course. Okay, no questions? Then I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Thank you. No extra roads, no extra maintenance, no extra trucks.
No.
Just the way it is. Now, we're going to Chris, number 8, 2022 budget update.
Oh, I didn't give a detailed report only because it includes all of our salary information and things like that. So I'm waiting for the new software to make those reports a little bit easier. This gives a department summary. It shows where we are. We have not issued the final tax bill, so you'll see in the revenue at the top for the general, we still have our tax bills to go out, but otherwise, for being at almost half of the year, we are on target for most of our budget. There's nothing that is concerning at this time.
Just take a minute just to go look through this.
In the expenses under social services, DSAB hasn't billed us for the entire year yet. Neither has the health unit, neither has East Home, neither has the library. So that's why some of those are still pending in ambulance.
Do you have an expectation of what they could possibly be?
They were all in our budget. Those are the amounts that we will be paying. So the budgeted amounts for the social services and health services will be those amounts.
Okay.
This is just showing where our cash flows are at this time. The major road projects have not started, so the public works expenses look a little bit low, but I'm sure Dan will fix that up for us quickly.
Thank you, Dan.
I can do that.
Does anyone have any questions?
This report includes the accounts payable that are on the agenda for this evening. And the protection of persons, that includes fire department, but it also includes the police. And the police are always, the policing billing is always a couple of months behind. So we're just paying April's bill now. That's why it looks a little bit off. So we're usually end up finalizing those bills by February of the following year.
There is a big, increase, Chris, I noticed in the Parks and Rec. Is that because of the playground? Does that include the grant in there or?
Oh, yes. The grant is in the Parks and Rec above in the revenue. It's included in that $114,000 for revenue. And the expense at the bottom.
We haven't paid that bill yet, so.
No.
we're-
We haven't received the grant and we have not paid the bill. And there's other grants that we have not received all of the money for as well. So the gas tax, the final amount isn't in here yet. The student grant for the museum student isn't in here yet, but it was budgeted for. It's just not showing up in the actual as of yet.
Okay, if there are no other questions on that. Always appreciate the pick up another hour sleep. So now we go to number 9. Discussion, procedural bylaw updates, electronic meetings, live streaming options. We had this discussion last time, and it seems that I think the general motion will be that we continue to live stream and continue to, unfortunately, at the last meeting, we were the only ones watching our meeting, but things will come up, and as Tom pointed out last time, in the sake of transparency, it's probably good to continue to have live stream, and also when we talk about the added cost of gas to come to a meeting or anything like that. It's funny though, when it is something controversial, how they make it here. And that's great, because then you actually put a name to a face and that kind of thing. So it is good. So we're giving them 2 options. And would that be the general consensus? That's what I picked up last time. A little slow in the pickup sometimes, but
I think it's good to hear. The other thing is I often hear about what's going on in some other municipalities. I think that people can live stream and see how well council does work together and how, the things are passed and we're in good shape.
Yeah.
And I can actually have the opportunity to see, because you hear some scary things about some municipalities.
Well, I think we have, live streaming has given us an advantage. We don't have a whole lot of controversy, probably because people can go online and watch it. So they're not getting it secondhand, they're getting it firsthand throughout the conversation.
Yeah, that's the problem with small community. If I heard this and I heard that, if they can get it right from the horse's mouth by watching it.
Yeah.
the other thing
Like
that
that old kids game where you tell one,
Yeah.
one tells another, and
Yeah.
it changes.
and how it gets distorted.
Yes.
But just a little credit, I think staff, and you have done excellent job, because I know other communities that are live streaming and, you know, their ratings are great, but not for the right reasons, you know? So this is a positive, and we're giving people the option if you can't and you want to. And the numbers Will pointed out were big on certain nights, and those were the controversial nights, whether it was to find a new counselor or to do the trailer bylaw. Those were our two biggest nights. Now, unfortunately, the trailer bylaw is in limbo for a while, but, you know, we've done our job, we've done our part, and now we'll see how the, you know, the government, and when we go through correspondence tonight, I think the first thing in correspondence is to get rid of that, which we do right now because we're in a conflict of interest, you know, we want to get rid of it. But anyway, that's for correspondence, but I think for the next meeting, we'll have a motion that we will continue, and then come next council, that may change again. We'll see, you know, but right now, I think that's the general feeling of everyone, so.
So we will place the procedural bylaw changes on the next council meeting once we finish the advertising for it, okay?
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
We'll move on to correspondence. So funny, I'm gonna lose my agenda 3 times tonight. The correspondence. And again, there was quite a lot to read. The first one again was the appointment of the new CAA at North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority. And again, I thank Tom for mentioning it to me. Number 2 is from the Orangeville Council, and that's to get rid of the OLT immediately. So we are in a conflict position right now. We have an appeal, and it would look bad if we said, yep, let's get rid of it because it's there.
For the purpose of that, I realize we probably can't speak a lot to it right now. The reasoning behind that, is that a preemptive approach to cutting red tape
Yes. Yes,
from the
exactly.
province? Okay, with future expectations.
And the funny thing is, the province says it needs to be there because some councils could say, we have decided we're going to subdivide our whole township into 30-foot lots, and, you know, that's it. We've decided it's done, which may be reckless. So then it can go there. Somebody will definitely appeal that. So that's the big brother approach. But the other way they're looking at it is when there are logical things and people may appeal it, then it ties it up for a year. And in an appeal case, we have to defend our decision. So it also could become costly, you know, to what extent you want to defend it, you know.
But don't we already have the Ontario Board of Adjustments or the Ontario Municipal Board? Well, it's gone. Well,
This Ontario Land Tribunal replaced that.
oh, I see,
Yeah.
okay, that.
Yeah.
So it's just a
The
new
biggest
name.
problem that come up on the course I had is the NZO, is that a lot of decisions made with the land tribunal can be overrun by the minister.
Right, exactly. The minister's exemption.
Yeah.
And that's another thing they're arguing about, you know. So we will see, but again, we are where we are right now. So we'll go on to number 4, and that's just Newmarket, and they're basically an information item endorsing the AMO firefighter certification questions. So they just said, we support AMO, which has said, despite the AMO said it should have been looked at longer, more people should have been just, you know, and it wasn't. And next, the number 5, the township of Tarbert. Deborah, did I get that right? See, I always called it Desbrats, and then the locals told me it's not Desbrats. Anyway, the this was interesting because this was on the news today at noon, which somebody told me is always the news from last night if you can't stay up till 6 o'clock at night. But they've already pushed this to happen in the Northern School of Medicine. And what the school is saying is they have to, it's going to take them a year to expand their intake, expand their programs and hire people to do this. So if this township says they want it to happen right now, a great idea, but it can't happen right now, you know? But I see what they want, and they pointed out that in the next 2 years, Northern Ontario is going to need 4,000 doctors. So, no,
Well, we did a resolution thing on this, supporting the school of medicine. Well,
Yes.
Yeah, that
we
was
did,
supported
and that
school,
passed,
yes.
it passed through the provincial government.
They spoke at Phenomenal
Yes,
about
they
this.
did.
And I thought that they had the okay to certify doctors
That's what we
Yeah,
heard
they do.
there.
without waiting for the Royal College of Physicians.
That's right, and she wanted municipal support to support that. To get them out a year earlier, you know,
Yeah.
working, so.
Right.
And she said with the support that all the municipalities did give them for the Northern Medical School, that support. She said without our small communities supporting that, it never would have happened.
The expansion.
That's
no.
right, no, it wouldn't have happened.
So is there something that we can do?
What will happen is the Northern School of Medicine will submit that
Yeah.
to FNUM, and then FNUM will put that out to us, and then we will support it exactly as, you know. But the one today is just make it happen right now, and they said they can't do it that way,
No,
and I understand.
we sat through the whole seminar.
Yeah.
And she outlined piece by piece by piece how it had to occur.
Yeah.
And that they were getting certification
Mhm.
privilege, would it be certification privileges?
Uh,
Where they wouldn't have to go through the Royal
Yeah,
College?
that's what she meant. They wanted to get them out there at ASAP because of the shortage, especially in Northern Ontario.
So they're already working on it.
Yes, Yeah.
So we will hear.
we will. We'll
Yeah,
end up getting a letter of hoping for us to approve that.
Okay, so next we have Aurora. I've read this, and again, violence against women is a Canadian public health crisis that demands urgent action. This is a private member's bill, and I've read it, and what it is, and you only need the one line, that Bill C-233, that will raise the level of education on domestic violence and coercive control for federally appointed judges. So that's what this bill is about, to educate judges on these. And I've met a few judges, and I don't think they're ever going to be educated. But anyway, perhaps we may or may not want to support this,
I
Yeah.
would say we support,
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
absolutely.
because anything to do with domestic violence.
Well, when you look at the percentages here,
Yeah,
I was looking at that, the percentages of reoccurrence tells me right off the top that judges aren't really familiar with quite often what they're dealing with here.
That's right. Often these cases are thrown out. If
Mhm.
we side for
Yeah.
the person doing
yeah, not the
the
plaintiff.
abuse, not the
Yeah.
plaintiff, no.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know why the judges rule that way.
Is it a
But-
lack of empathy or is it a lack of
Well,
training? in
We're
that
hoping it's a
field?
lack of education, so that's
Mhm.
what they would get out of this scenario.
So we'll look at then to support that.
On the private member should have been down as far as law school.
Yes,
Mhm.
Yeah, because that's the
Absolutely.
future judges.
Yeah, but evidently not. So I think what I'm hearing is that we'll look at supporting this on
Mhm.
our next one. Cambridge. This is, if you read it all, Tom again would be more familiar on the Ontario Building Code, where the original tiered building model code. I can't even comment on this because I have no knowledge of the building code.
No, I don't, like, we didn't get into a lot of the planning.
No, and I
They
think,
just kept saying the building code's there.
right,
What is a net zero house? What is a net zero building?
It's environmentally, super environmentally friendly.
Oh, okay, so Kate.
yeah. Well,
It just doesn't use as much power, it, you know, it's the heating
What-
costs and hydro and all that.
But what I'm saying here, when I read it and I'm thinking, well, what's this going to do to the cost of housing?
So it'd be higher.
Like you look at the mechanicals in the houses is well over 30% of the cost of building now.
Yeah.
Whereas in the old days, it was 5 to 10% of the cost of building,
No, it'll make it higher because of all that.
because it's going to be more mechanical and less structure.
Yeah, and it's more insulation and more friendly heat.
and again, up here, where we continue to use fossil fuels as far as burning wood, they wouldn't like that.
No, and I will never see natural gas. in
No.
No.
A lot of places in Nipissing.
And burning wood in these ultra efficient houses doesn't burn that well.
No, all you have to do an air.
You gotta have air in to have air out, man. You know, physics.
Yeah,
I could see like a lot of this for the tiny homes and stuff too, where they're nice and snug and airtight. Heating, but Northern Ontario,
I don't think when we make these houses that airtight, I don't think that's healthy. At all.
I have to agree with you there.
When I grew up, a lot of our houses were board and batten kind of stuff, but you never seen the mold, you never seen all the stuff that we see now, just because there's no, there's not enough exchange air anymore.
Well, you got a lot of dead air and a lot of CO2. And mold likes CO2. Because it's growing, it will convert it to oxygen eventually, but
yeah. In the meantime,
in the meantime.
so I think we will just leave that as an information item. Number 8, again from Cambridge, they've been really busy. That one, I'm gonna have to say, we are researching it. Reinsurance, because and our insurance is gonna come out, Chris thinks within the next month or so. So then
Yeah.
they've informed us, and then we will be able to make a more, greater effort looking at it.
That's the one that really interests me. 'Cause I thought
Yep.
When you hear some of the 23, 26% increases.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Some of
size
those
30%.
Our insurance renewal should be on the next agenda because it renews July the 3rd, so we will get it in advance so that we can review it.
So then they would look at,
Yeah.
Cambridge saying,
Yep.
area the increases.
It is. So we kind of table that, go on to the District of Muskoka. And it's interesting. They're saying if you have an emergency, then you really don't need a tabletop emergency because you've already looked to see how it works. But you may not have used everything. Like if it's a fire, you might not have to use, other health services, that kind of thing. In talking to our staff, tabletops do take time, takes a lot of energy. Some people don't take it seriously, some people don't come, that kind of thing. So it's a lot of work, and they're saying you shouldn't have to have it if you have an emergency. In our case, I hope we never have an emergency, that we never have to declare an emergency. So maybe we continue to do the tabletop, but, you know, we didn't do it last year. They were shut down, let's say, for COVID. And so we'll see if it comes up again this year, you know?
Didn't most of the province not do it last year
Yeah.
for this?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The only thing I find when we do it, you see, oh, that's the cop that's in charge, and that's the guy from the ambulance. Oh, and this is the new guy at health, you know.
But
So,
it is good to see them how they all interact.
yeah. So, you know, whether we
When I
support,
was on that planning seminar, one guy was from Hastings. Their municipality lost 2,000 hydro poles. And they declared state of emergency, and he was talking about how you really gotta get the council and people together
yeah,
Mhm.
on that. So he said every one of them was busy for days without any sleep. So that, you know, sometimes to get to know people who's.
exactly.
It gives you an opportunity to get to know the resources in your township
Mhm.
more intimately, like we like to think that we know our resources that well. But when you have an emergency and you're dealing face to face with each supplier of a resource, then you get to know them quite a bit better.
So we, again, probably continue. The next one is just, this is about voters list for people that aren't residents in your community. And our voters list, we don't do anything with the voters list. For those of you that are running, voters list comes out when, Chris? Voters list,
September 1st, we are supposed to have it from Impact. We don't alter it or edit it. We don't take out addresses or anything that's in it. We give it out the way it comes.
right, so in ours, everything's there, it comes from MPAC, and we don't do it, so we do supply the address, so not a point of interest for us. And the last one, Crime Stoppers, traditionally, none of us golf. So traditionally, though, we have given them a donation, a $100 donation. So if everybody is, you know, in agreement to that, we'll do that for the next one. And we'll have one, because the next, other than that, whole sponsor starts at 150, and I mean, we give $100, so I think we can go ahead and go and do that. So you'll have that as a motion for the next meeting as well. Any questions on correspondence? Okay, who wants to? Councillor Kirky and Councillor Moore. Okay, thank you. So it's number R 2022-131. Moved by Councillor Kirky, seconded by Councillor Moore, that we accept the correspondence as presented. All in favor? Yes. Thanks. Okay, the next. Statement of accounts. And I know you got it late this afternoon, and Councillor Moore already asked about the capital at 123, and that is the new computer system,
Yes, the new municipal software program.
municipal software program. That kind of jumps out at you.
Yeah.
And we weren't sure, so first we accused Dan, of course, and he said it wasn't his. Will said there wasn't a chance it was his. We tried to blame it on the rec committee on the kids' playground stuff, and it turned out when Chris got on, she pointed that out, and it's exactly what it says, so. I'll have you look it over though in case there's anything else.
So Dan, are we all done with the dust control materials now?
5 loads went down.
this is our final bill on it then?
Yeah, well, I don't know if we got the bill from them yet or not.
There might be one more.
Oh,
Might be on that.
And we've already had people calling, thanking us for what a good job Dan did with the council. So, excellent. Or it could just rain all summer. We won't have to worry about it.
Next week, they're gonna be talking about the soupy roads.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. Anyway, mover and seconder. Thank you, Councilor Scott and Councilor Marchant. Thank you. So it's number R 2022-132. Moved by Councilor Scott, seconded by Councilor Marchant. With the statement of account dated May 26th and June 7th, 2022, totaling $374,287.88 be approved. All in favor? Carried. Okay, so we have those additions for the next one that Chris and Kristen have noted. We will probably have private session. The next one, closed session.
Yeah.
The next one, we have a few things coming up, and otherwise, if there are no other questions, we have the confirming bylaw. So we'll move her into second. Councilor Moore and Councilor March, thank you. So it's number R 2022-133, moved by Councilor Moore, seconded by Councilor Marchant, that we pass bylaw number 2022-33, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on June 7th, 2022, read the first, second, and third time, and passed the 7th day of June, 2022. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And last but not least, meeting to be adjourned, and the next meeting will be on June 21st. So mover and the seconder, please. Councilor Marchant, thank you. And Councilor Kirk. Thank you. It's number R 2022-134, moved by Councilor Marchant, seconded by Councilor Kirky. The meeting be adjourned at about 7:49 p.m. The next regular meeting will be held June 21st, 2022. All in favor? I'm not sure this year if that's first day of summer or not. That's what I was always taught.
That was the 21st this year.
Pardon?
Was it the 21st?
I thought it was 20.
Okay.
December